Is it just me? Or did anybody else notice the United States government just made a crazy announcement?
Gold was your biggest holding when you were a hedge fund manager before you divested to become the Treasury Secretary. So you know the value of where gold is right now versus where it's marked on its balance sheet, just north of $40 an ounce. It's close to $3,000. Is it under consideration for this administration to revalue gold?
I think that somehow when we were talking about the sovereign wealth fund and I said monetize the balance sheet, I can promise you that's not what I had in mind.
So it's not under consideration, not on the table.
That's not what I had in mind.
So if they're not going to monetize gold, then are they going to monetize Bitcoin? Bitcoin goes to the moon if the United States starts a strategic reserve. But how much will they buy? 20% of the network?
The U.S. could own 20% of the network like that for free. The dollar would strengthen, the nation would be enriched. And the real promise is if you own 4 to 6 million Bitcoin, you're going to pay off the entire national debt. You're going to neutralize it. We can generate a $50 trillion to $80 trillion benefit to the United States people, to the citizens, to the taxpayers. And we can do it simply by seeing the future. It cost $6 million to buy Alaska. The payoff was $1 trillion. Just like right now, you can literally buy it for a song and dance. That's the opportunity.
Bitcoin is the hard money of the future. Gold is the hard money of the past. And do we really think that the gold is actually there in Fort Knox?
Do you believe the U.S. government has all the gold that it claims to have?
No, I don't. But I don't have evidence to prove it. A lot of people write about it and explain it. But no, in a way, if they did, why wouldn't they want to clear the air? Why wouldn't they have a commission that I was included in? Let's go and see and convince us that you have the gold.
People want proof. People are tired of the gimmicks. People want to see more governments, corporations, and institutions implement an open transparency policy, like Metaplanet. Show us, don't tell us. And you know what? People are tired of the Fed. With Cash being named the director of the FBI, is the Fed finally going to get exposed for the frauds that they truly are?
So I think we got to educate people that the Federal Reserve is not a public government entity. It's a private entity owned by the robber barons that started this country, who manipulate the currency to their advantage. And that needs to be tackled. Again, I'm not the economic guru. I just know it's a problem. And I'll be honest with you, I don't know what the solution is, but it needs to be addressed.
Today, we're going to walk through the implications of the United States starting a strategic Bitcoin reserve and the price targets that would send us to. 1 million, anybody?
I think it should have been last year, but I had to push it back. So let's say 2025, 1 million.
This is Dante Cook with Bitcoin Simply. Let's go.
There's a struggle between capitalism and socialism, between people that believe in freedom and free markets and those that believe in central planning and collectivism. And if I'm a socialist, I want to take away your guns and your money. And Bitcoin is money that they can't take away. Like, what freedom do you have if you have all of your money in a bank that can freeze it? What freedom do you have if you have your money embedded in a currency where someone can print 4x more of it without your approval and debase it to zero? What freedom do you have if you own real estate in a city where the mayor can put rent control on it or expropriate it, or the governor can tax it away from your family? What freedom do you have if all your wealth is in a business where the government can tell you you can't operate, shut down your pipeline, tax your employees, tax your income, regulate your product? And the answer is, you only have conditional freedom until the government changes and they just take away that freedom. And then when they take away your wealth, when they take away your economic power, they're going to starve you to death, and then you've got nothing. So Bitcoin represents putting your economic wealth in cyberspace. It's beyond the reach of the mayor, beyond the reach of the governor, beyond the reach of any nation state, beyond the reach of any other company that would do you harm. It is the first time in the history of the human race that you can bind economic energy tightly to an individual, to a family, to your company, and you don't have to ask permission to have economic wealth, to have money, and you don't have to live in fear that someone gets up on a morning and just takes it all away from you to power you down.
This is the big idea of Bitcoin. People don't want to trust other corporations. They want to have self-sovereignty. They don't want any gimmicks and they don't want any games.
One thing potentially that could happen, and people are questioning it, is maybe remarking gold. Elon Musk, who's leading Doge, was talking about maybe going to Fort Knox to make sure those gold reserves are there. That comes under your purview. Do you have any plans to visit Kentucky?
I don't have any plans. I can tell you that we do an audit every year. I can tell the American people on camera right now that there was a report September 30th, 2024. All the gold is there. Any U.S. senator who wants to come and visit it can arrange a visit through our office.
No smiling in interviews. We want receipts. We want actual proof that the gold that you say is there is actually there. With Doge and the United States government acting out in the open, we hope that if they implement a strategic Bitcoin reserve, that they act in the same way. This would cause a truth frenzy globally, unlike one we've ever seen.
There's only room for one nation state to buy up 20% of the network. And obviously, I think it should be the United States. I think it will be the United States. It's a way for us to enrich ourselves and emerge as a creditor nation in a matter of a decade. It's also a way for us to ensure that we're the economic leaders in cyberspace and the digital economy for the next 100 years. And if we do that, every one of our allies will follow us, and then all of our enemies will end up having to buy into the network once it passes 10 or 20 million a coin, and they will enrich us.
The United States has made it clear that they want to be the leader in AI, energy, and finance. What better way to do that than Bitcoin?
The way to think about Bitcoin is it's the most powerful digital network in the world. It is cyber power. If you want to dominate the next 100 years, just like the last 100 years is based upon dominating sea power, fire power, air power, space power, nuclear power. You want to dominate cyberspace. You want cyber power. It's the unstoppable network that no one can corrupt. And the use of the unstoppable network, among other things, is hundreds of trillions of dollars of capital moving from point A to point B. But the other use of the network is I can send a message which is unstoppable, and I can store information that is unstoppable, and I can prove beyond a shadow of a doubt the authenticity of an instruction or a document. No country, no company, no individual, not 1 trillion computers can corrupt that message. So if you want to own the future, you want to own cyberspace. How do you own cyberspace? You own Bitcoin, and then you run the Bitcoin networks. You mine Bitcoin, you own Bitcoin.
Let's take a quick break to thank our sponsors. Speaking of the dominant leader, Ledn has been the dominant leader in Bitcoin lending since 2018. They've lent out over $7 billion worth of loans to tens of thousands of customers. They have great ratings and reviews on review sites like Trustpilot, and they've never lost a single cent or sat of customer money. You can unlock liquidity in your Bitcoin without selling your Bitcoin. And the process for getting one of these loans is simple. You post 2 times the amount of collateral that you receive in your local currency. The loan process takes just 2 minutes, and you can get liquidity in your local currency in your account in less than 24 hours. Go to ledn.il/borrowing to start the loan process today and see if you qualify. That's ledn.il/borrowing. Our other sponsor to help you to take self-custody and to protect your generational wealth the right way is the Bitcoin Way. Members of their team will teach you how to take self-custody of your Bitcoin and remove all counterparty risk from third parties and exchanges like Coinbase, who's going to try to sell you meme coins and other things. Bitcoin is the true asset because Bitcoin is the asset that you can verify and you can own for yourself. Schedule a free 30-minute consultation with their team in order to walk through the steps to financial freedom and self-sovereignty. Go to thebitcoinway.com/simplybitcoin to schedule a free 30-minute consultation with their team. That's thebitcoinway.com/simplybitcoin. Sure, these clips from Saylor are bullish, but let's get a different perspective on the big idea that's happening in Bitcoin.
The U.S. absolutely needs a Bitcoin reserve, and I think every other country does as well. The way I see it is Bitcoin is going to be the next major economic driver. Like people are very bullish on AI, and they think AI is going to change the entire financial landscape because of massive investment amounts into it. But all those companies that are doing things like AI, they need to store their money somewhere. Like NVIDIA needs a vehicle to store their money from selling chips and whatnot, similar to what MicroStrategy is doing, right? They're trying to protect their savings. And it's just the same thing, but on a nation-state level, where countries realize that this is the next big thing. This is a superior asset class, and they're going to need to do something. And you couple that with the astronomical debt levels and the attempts to mitigate that, like creating the Department of Government Efficiency, right? And it goes to show that people are realizing that the existing system is not sustainable. The interest payments are approaching 1 trillion or are at 1 trillion a year. And it's only going to snowball because interest compounds unless they magically fix the interest rates somehow. But everything points to Bitcoin becoming the new asset that everyone's just piling into. And I think the US doing it will trigger it everywhere else.
Corporations, nation states, and governments all need a neutral place in order to store their capital. Right now, there is no other asset class that does not have risk of interest rate risk, valuation risk, tariff risk, country risk, geopolitical risk, geographical risk, natural disaster risk, or a threat of war. Bitcoin is the only neutral third-party asset where these companies, corporations, and governments can maintain sovereignty and protect their wealth. Even before governments, I believe that companies are going to be the first mover in this race to acquire Bitcoin as a strategic reserve asset, with Michael Saylor and MicroStrategy leading the way. They just announced another $2 billion convertible note offering that matures in 5 years with a 0% coupon. This vehicle has allowed investors to outperform Bitcoin with downside protection. And this is why if nation states don't do it first, the next big tranche of capital is going to be the insurance market and the private capital markets. Listen to this explanation from Jeff Walton and Preston Pish.
What I'm fascinated about is all of 100% of the convertible debt that's been issued so far, private placement, unrated, right? So
get into that,
So they've been private placements and they've been 100% unrated bonds. So like if you think about, any money manager, let's say you're a money manager underwriter and you've got to go tell your boss that you want to buy bonds. And you've got two options. You've got a rated security and an unrated security, and you kind of outline it to them. The unrated security looks sketchy, right? If you have just opportunity cost of capital and you're viewing all of these different securities, unrated securities, there's less of a market that's willing and able to invest in unrated securities. Now, fast forward to the future, if we're going to look at tapping these larger pools of capital, I could see this going many different directions where you start getting rated securities. They go through the process of having a public offering and having rated securities. Well, let's just say they're B-rated securities and going through that entire process. Now, why I think this is going to happen is because we've got FASB fair value accounting coming in 2025, which I think is going to be monumental for really just the perception of MicroStrategy within the market, potentially getting added to the S&P 500, which would boost credit quality. Once the market cap starts to rise, 250 billion, 500 billion, the credit quality of MicroStrategy increases drastically with that. So they have the ability to potentially offer, rated products to the market, which taps a completely different pool of capital. Like there's a small pool of capital that can invest in unrated bonds, and the pool of capital that can invest in rated bonds increases just dramatically. And in my world, from an insurance, my background thinking about reinsurance and insurance, most of the insurance market, they invest in bonds. The insurance market, they can't put Bitcoin on their balance sheet. They get zero regulatory credit for it. So that means you can't leverage against it. But you know what you can add to your balance sheet? MicroStrategy convertible debt. And you can get your Bitcoin exposure and leverage a portfolio against it.
While we chop sideways, this chart from Checkmatey has me incredibly bullish about where Bitcoin is and why we are chopping sideways right now. Normal market behavior is playing out. After we have violent rips in price, weaker hands sell while stronger hands continue to accumulate. Based on his analysis, the majority of these sells that have been happening during this, what he calls chop solidation, have been between 53K and 73K. These are likely the people that bought into the ETFs and saw a major price rip at the beginning of last year. But The majority of the accumulation that's been happening has been happening with the price between 92K and 98K, setting a new high floor, which is what Bitcoin continues to do cycle after cycle and rip after rip. Once we have a meaningful crack above 108K or all-time highs, I believe that we see much higher prices. And the self-fulfilling loop in prophecy begins.
Well, the thing you have to understand is, as the Bitcoin price goes up, the entire market dynamic changes. So Bitcoin at 100K is kind of like this. People are excited, but now they're bored again. People think it's a top. People are making predictions of a reasonable price target, maybe 150, maybe 200. They don't want to go too crazy out there. But when Bitcoin goes to 250, it's a very different landscape. When we get to 500,000, it's also a very different landscape too. We're halfway to overtaking gold. And at that point, people are starting to wonder, what do I sell Bitcoin for? Why am I selling Bitcoin for dollars? And then that catapults us again. So it's probably like a 2 or 3x from here, and then another 2 or 3x to get us to 1 million.
Don't be late to the game. Bitcoin is the future of capital. Now is the perfect time to accumulate sats and accumulate knowledge before we have the next big run in Bitcoin's price. One of the best ways that you can accumulate knowledge and grow your Bitcoin network is by coming down to Dallas, Texas for the BitBlockBoom conference from April 3rd through April 6th. Join me and hundreds of other people from across the world at the United States' longest running Bitcoin conference. Hear from some of your favorite speakers like me, Parker Lewis, Marty Bent, Guy Swan, Bob Burnett. It's going to be an action-packed speaker lineup. And you're going to get to hang out with some of your favorite Bitcoiners in real life. One of my favorite things in conferences, now that I've been to a few over the years, is just getting to catch up with other friends and people in the Bitcoin industry that I admire greatly. You're going to get an opportunity to do things like that at the Saturday casino night. Get $100 off your all-inclusive ticket by going to bitblockboom.com and entering the promo code BBB25. That's bitblockboom.com and enter the promo code BBB25. This is Dante Coke with Bitcoin Simply. Happy stacking.